Hey friends, welcome to episode 613 of the My 123 Cents podcast. I am Kevin Huntsberger, joined once again this week by Chad Smart. And Chad, we're going to be talking faces and heels or good guys and bad guys. I always feel weird using the terminology, and I don't know. I listen to other fan podcasts and they say
Yeah.
faces and heels, but it doesn't feel natural, I guess. Well, what do you think? Because, when we were kids, we called them good guys and bad guys.
Yeah. I would say faces and heels is better than I know. To call you out for because you've been in the industry, you have that industry speak. You speak
Hmm.
carny, you're like, oh, the baby does this, or the baby like that
Yeah.
seems weirder to me than
Yeah.
face and heel. But
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
you mentioned right before we started recording my shirt. I was trying to figure out what to wear today to fit. This is a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle parody, I guess.
I got to
But
put the glasses on for this. Okay. Oh, I
yeah,
like
Teenage
that.
Mutant Ninja Wrestlers. But
Okay.
who do the Ninja Turtles? What is the evil organization that they face? The Foot Clan. What's part of the Foot? The heel. So connect
Ah,
the dots. Massive dork.
yes.
That's how I went with this shirt. But
I made
um,
it plain and simple. I got Sheik, Wolf Hoff, and Roddy Piper back from the Rock and Wrestling days. You bought me this shirt years ago.
yeah,
So, yeah.
I saw a video just before we started recording of the Sheik doing a somersault, not leg drop, but similar to a leg drop. Um,
The original
so
Sheik or the Iron Sheik?
the Iron Sheik,
Really?
yes,
Wow.
came off the ropes, did a flippy flip, and I think Gorilla Monsoon said, "Ah, he's killing the business. What's going on here?"
Well, speaking of the Sheik, I saw a video of him the other day doing, from different tirades that he's had and calling people out. So, but yeah, I kind of want to get into the whole good guy, bad guy, heel face. If you're watching, I have a few here sitting here watching us record this week's episode of good guys or bad guys. And before we get into the crux of our conversation, and some of these we'll build off of, and I don't need elaborate answers, but if you want to give elaborate answers, you can. Just tell me, better as a face, better as a heel, and if we warrants a further discussion, because some of them we'll talk about later on as
Uh,
well. Sure. The first one, you see him here, Roddy Piper. Now, as a kid, obviously, he's one of those forces that hooked us as a bad guy, because as we've talked about before, without, Roddy Piper as that foil, do we get Hulkamania as strong as it becomes in the mid 80s?
I said the only time I've cheered for Hulk Hogan was WrestleMania one, and that reason was because I hated Roddy Piper.
Hmm.
So, and and Piper's one that I guess it would be after WrestleMania three when he officially became a face for.
No, after WrestleMania 2. He
Was it
retired
after
at WrestleMania 3.
WrestleMania three? Yeah, I was yeah. Sorry, I had him change after shaving Adonis's head, which I know is beefcake, but I just associate the face turn with
Oh,
that point because then he goes off to do Hell Comes to Frogtown, which is one of the greatest underappreciated movies that talks about Roddy Piper's testicular fortitude, if you will. I don't know if you've seen the movie; it will give you nightmares. But Piper is one of those that became one of the greatest faces. I wouldn't say greatest faces, but became a face that worked a lot better
right.
than expected. But
Yeah.
but again, anyone that has looked at my Instagram page, my profile picture is still from 10, 12 years ago when I met Piper, and one of the nicest people that I met, which I would not have expected at 10 years old.
Right.
But
Right.
but I think even though he was great as a face, I think the heel. I think he was just. I want to say he was a natural heel, but the heel persona really worked for him.
Yeah, and I mean, for our fandom, though,
Yeah,
the majority of it, he was a face. So
yeah,
he's one of those guys. There are very few, and their names on this list, and I'm kind of saying good guy, bad guy, or both. And I think Piper obviously fits into that both category of
yeah,
able to do it and do it well. Ric
yeah.
Flair, to me always better as a heel, but he had face runs here and there, even in
Yeah.
the old JCP days when he teamed up with Sting against Muta and Funk at the first Halloween Havoc. Ric Flair is a good guy. To me, it just doesn't fit. Now, as he got older in the WWE, it made sense because they're kind of cheering for the legend, the
Yeah.
underdog, if you will, because he kind of became that character. But I think Rick is a natural heel as well,
I mean, just
especially
go
if you read
on.
his Twitter these days.
You took the joke out of my mouth. I
Oh,
was going to say,
okay,
to go
okay.
look at his Instagram, and you'll see he is a natural heel. Yeah, he's not. I think you know. I would say, unfortunately, I think he may have been the prototype. Probably not, because I guess you can go back to Superstar Billy Graham as the cool heel.
Mhm.
Um, because during the Horseman days, there were guys, in the crowd dressed in suits and holding up the four fingers. And granted, it was the yuppie era, uh, but yeah, I think Flair, like you mentioned, now if he comes back into wrestling for the most part, I think anybody from the golden era is treated as a face. How many
Mhm.
times has Ted DiBiase showed up and gotten cheered, and
Right.
he was never a face on TV. So, but Flair, I go with the heel.
Yeah, I agree. This next one, is one that I think kind of unexpectedly transcends both as well. And that's Hulk Hogan. In the golden era of the WWF, he made it was a big part of that boom in
Mhm.
wrestling. And then again in 1996, when wrestling was at a lull on both sides or both channels, WCW
Mhm.
and WWE, WWF. Without that Hogan heel turn, I question the strength of the industry after that because it then forced Vince McMahon to do something different as well. Because the unimaginable happens, Hulk Hogan turns bad. I just think that it was time, obviously, and when we
Mhm.
get into the crux of our discussion, we're going to talk about modern day current guys as well with this kind of mentality. But it worked, and I think Hogan did great in both roles, and it's hard to still sometimes think about the fact that Hulk Hogan will probably go down as one of the best in WCW as well. And I know a lot of times people associate Dusty or Ric Flair or Sting, rightfully so, but Hulk Hogan's contribution in that era can't go understated, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm sitting here, I'm going to go with revisionist history and say, was Hogan's heel turn, did it work because Hogan was a good heel, or did it work because he had Hall and Nash next to him? And they were, again, playing the cool heel, whereas Hogan, I think he was kind of a cheesy, like he wanted to be the cool heel, but it didn't really fit his persona because he was, the guy that looked 40 trying to be 20, whereas Hall Nash also older than 20,
Hmm.
but somehow I could see Nash listening to the Fugees or the Wu Tang Clan more than I could see Hogan, and
Yeah.
for I guess reasons that I won't elaborate on.
Yeah, yeah.
But um, but I don't. But again, I mean, I can't deny that Hogan's popularity is what helped as well. But I think I would put Hogan in the face category.
Yeah. Well,
I
let's
think the heel run with the NWO worked because of the story, not because of Hogan specifically.
let's talk more about that because there are, in my opinion, at least, there are different types of heels. You have
Mm,
the chicken shit heel who kind of was Ric Flair back in the day. He would talk, and then when it came,
mm,
if Dusty came out, he would retreat. You know what I mean, and
yeah,
and and walk away. You have the monster heel, the Kane, the Undertaker, the Big John Studd, the King Kong Bundy, the big massive guys that Hogan had to overcome back in the
yeah,
WWF days, and then the cool heel, like you said, with Hall and Nash. And in my humble opinion, I think that is kind of what has led to this discussion today because in my opinion you don't have those well-defined heels and sometimes even faces anymore because as good
yeah,
as the NWO was for the industry, I also think the after effects of that have kind of I don't necessarily want to say hurt, because let's face facts. Both companies, AEW and WWE, are
Yeah.
big business, billionaires. The wrestlers are under guaranteed contracts. They're making more money today than they've ever made before. So from that perspective, it's good. But from a fan storytelling consumption
Yeah.
perspective, I don't know that it is. And I do think, like you said, Hall and Nash were cool, and they didn't. They did from time to time, but they didn't run away. They weren't the
Mhm.
chicken shit heels. They weren't necessarily the monsters. Wrestling became more quote unquote realistic looking. They're using their real names. They're not Diesel and Razor Ramon
Mhm.
anymore.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, yeah, I do think the cool heel kind of hurt the longevity of the concept of good versus bad. And there's all kinds of side roads I think we're going to end up taking with this
Yeah.
discussion.
No, I agree with you. And I think, you know, the cool heel, I guess that leads to then to Steve Austin,
Hmm.
who was heel, turned face, but didn't change mannerisms
Right.
to fit into the face. So, and that's when you get Vince McMahon's, well, the world's not black and white, it's shades of gray. And I think that does play well into wrestling, but at the same time, yeah, it then takes away, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit, elaborate on more, but like right now with the bloodline in WWE, are they faces or are they heels?
Right.
Because they play to the crowd like faces, but then their actions are more heelish in the ring. So yeah.
Yeah, and that, I mean, let's dive in, because even back in the day, as my shirt demonstrates,
Yeah.
Roddy Piper, the Iron Sheik, Nikolai Volkov, Big John Studd, King Kong Bundy, all, when you went back in even in the promotion days, the locker rooms were separated. The
Yeah.
heels came out from one side, the baby faces came out from another side, and they didn't commingle. You didn't have until they got in trouble for it. But for example, the Iron Sheik and Hacksaw Jim Duggan. I
Yeah.
remember they got busted riding together. They had drugs in the car, but I think for most fans, the biggest shock was that they were riding together because they were fighting on TV. And that's where
Yeah.
more of the outrage came from than the fact that they had cocaine and marijuana in
Right.
the car. And so, and old school guys like Jim Cornette, and I'm using him as the example because he's probably the most still vocal about all of this, keeping it separated.
Mhm.
But it's like, if you think about real life, yeah, I know people who I are kind of heelish in their ways, but I'm still friends with them.
Yeah.
So is it so ridiculous to think that, Hacksaw and Iron Sheik, and I know obviously the story with there was uh, Iron Sheik was crapping on the United States, and Hacksaw was the ultimate patriot at the time.
Yeah.
So I, but it's so funny to me to think, when you look at it, and again, you do the wrestling with logic,
Mhm.
just because someone decides to bend the rules, are they no longer friends? Hogan and Savage obviously broke up because of the Elizabeth thing, and so yeah, I
There's
could,
lust in his eyes,
yeah,
brother.
I see
I don't
that
know why I did it, brother.
being a breakup, where they're
Yeah.
not going to hang out and associate. But if Savage was friends with Brutus Beefcake or with
Mhm.
Hacksaw before, now all of a sudden they can't like him because he
Yeah.
doesn't like Hulk Hogan anymore. And that's always where today I think they're getting more away from that, because in AEW, for example, recently, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm just going off
Mhm.
the social media post. Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega are going to fight at the big event in Wembley,
Yeah.
and then John Moxley, who is a Death Rider and alleged bad guy, I guess. They were all in a six-man tag together, and so we're intermingling faces and heels there. And again, it's more of these shades of gray, I guess, where
Yeah.
at SummerSlam, Punk and Cody Rhodes, two good guys. At WrestleMania, it was Punk and Roman Reigns, two good guys.
Yeah.
Because is it because the heel pool is so shallow right now, or because they're really, in my opinion, it's a lost art form of art form, whatever the word is that I'm trying to find, but
Art bar.
yeah, art bar. We don't have, to me, those clear cut. You knew,
Yeah.
when Andre turned on Hogan, Andre was the bad guy. Today, it's harder to define that, and I think that's maybe sometimes where you get these split crowds, and maybe the fans have adapted and accepted it, but old school fans like you and I don't know. What are your thoughts? Do you think it needs to be more of a defined bad guy versus a defined good guy especially when we're fighting for the belt, or does that mean Ricky the Dragon Steamboat should have never had a championship match against Hulk Hogan back in the day? Two
Yeah.
of the top baby faces in the company. I'm throwing a lot out because there's a
There's a
lot.
lot to unpack right here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go first. We use an example from one of the things that got me into Chikara wrestling, besides the goofiness that I
Uh-huh.
love, is when they had their first, I'm going to say their first major storyline. Um, it was when the Kings of Wrestling took over. Hero uh, turned on Quack, sided with Claudio Castagnoli, and Eric set up the Chair's Cannon. And throughout that season, the Kings of Wrestling were dominant. And then as Claudio and Hero got more heelish, Eric Cannon was kind of like, hey, I don't know if I'm buying into all this. And then at the final show, he turns on the Kings and helps Quack and I think Jigsaw, beat the Kings. And then he goes, after the little melee is over with, he goes up to shake or high five Quack, and Quack looks at him. He's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "No, didn't you see? I just helped you." He's like, "My memory goes back more than 15 seconds," and I think,
Mm-hmm.
that's for something for wrestling. Maybe a future Wrestling with Logic episode where whenever someone turns, like all of a sudden, if they turn heel to face, all of a sudden all the good guys accept them. If they turn heel, all the bad guys accept them. And it's like,
Yeah, and that's what I was
yeah,
meaning earlier. Yeah.
it's like why,
Yeah.
why? Um, but again, I think that's part of wrestling storytelling that we just accept.
Yeah.
It's a suspension of disbelief. Uh, I think because of the cool heel factor over the last 20 years, it
Hey,
and
it's
maybe
been 30 years actually.
30. Okay, I was just going with 2000, but
Okay.
yes, um, but also with the rise of social media,
Yes. Yes.
where fans are no longer being like, I think before it would be like if WWF came out and said, Hulk Hogan is your good guy, Roddy Piper is your bad guy. That's what and the fans would be like, okay, I'm going to cheer Hogan, I'm going to boo Piper. And now they're, is it society that we live in? Is it people just wanting to troll? But it's like, no, I'm going to cheer or boo whoever I want to. And, um, is it that factor, or is it also like we've seen how WWF will choose one person to be the face of the company?
Mm-hmm.
If it's not who the fans want at that moment, do they buy into it or do they reject it? So
Right.
you get that part too. And then to your question of, I think this current situation does lend better to a face versus face or heel versus heel matches happening. Whether
Mm-hmm.
they should or not, I mean, that's debatable, I guess, amongst who's fighting, what the story is. But yeah, I think, just because Hulk Hogan held the title, well, why can't Ricky Steamboat have a title shot? Why can't JYD get the
Right.
title shot?
Yeah.
And then I guess that was why Andre turned on Hogan. He's like, you never gave me a title shot.
Yeah.
And
Well, and
so,
I think we saw though, and this could be other factors, but let's go back to 1990 when we
mhm.
get Hogan and Warrior at WrestleMania 6, and it's the first time, and at least in that era, uh, the last time that until 92, I guess, when we get Bulldog
Mm.
versus Bret Hart, but they didn't really do a lot of face versus face matches, and some will blame the fact that the gate was lower or the
Mhm.
pay-per-view buys were lower compared to WrestleMania 5, where you had Hogan and Savage in a true story,
The
one of the
story, yeah.
greatest stories ever in wrestling, and so you had that rivalry built up. Whereas with Hogan and Warrior, it was just two of the most popular guys wrestling, and I would argue that in 1990, yeah, WWE didn't have anybody primed and ready to go against Hogan
Mhm.
that you thought maybe, like, I didn't think King Kong Bundy was going to beat Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 2, but I
He
did
did.
I did think that Andre had a legitimate
Mm.
shot, at
And he
beating
beat Hogan.
Stop it. So, that I think that may be part of it too, is that maybe they were, again, because back in the 80s it was more of that black and white, good guy
Yeah.
versus bad guy, and this is where we're going. We're not going to have the rivalries and stuff, even though in JCP, we did get heel Flair versus heel Nikita Koloff, and there were some instances where the heel did wrestle Ric Flair for the title, and then they kind of flirted with Flair going face, but then of course the Horsemen make their presence known, and eventually we get the Nikita face turn. But anyway, to me it's always been, because Dusty Rhodes versus, there were plenty of guys I think could have been great, but does that then, like you said, with Andre turning, why couldn't Hogan have wrestled Andre in a good guy versus bad guy? Well, because then we get a better rivalry, I think, because I liked it better with Andre with Bobby Heenan than it would have just
Mm.
been bushy hair Andre coming out and wrestling Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 3. So
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think because I think you need that dynamic, and I think that's something that's kind of missing in today's story. And I also because with the stories that are being told, I'm going to look at WWE specifically right now
mhm.
with Punk and Kevin Owens. It's another factor of the last 30 years, again, with social media, with the internet, is we have more knowledge of outside the ring instances.
Yeah, yeah,
So WWE right now, I guess, with the Kevin Owens storyline, is bringing up something that happened 20 years ago between Punk and
hmm,
Owens on a Ring of Honor show.
hmm,
Obviously, the problem is they won't mention Ring of Honor. They won't. I think Punk made some comment about your three friends, which are the Young Bucks, and I don't know if Kenny Omega is the third one or whatever. But it's like he's not going to explicitly say this is who I'm talking about, which would give credits because of the whole AEW issue with Punk.
right,
So if you're a fan who isn't following, you're like, what are you talking about?
hmm,
But I think at the same time there is that animosity between the two to play off of and say, but bring it more into your current day and just say something, mention something that happened backstage, you know, that you can make up, but be it based on a real situation.
yeah,
Um, I don't know. But yeah, I think this is where Punk is super popular, Owens is super popular, but they both, going back to the original game at the beginning of this conversation, face, heel, or both, I
yeah,
think both of them fit into the
right,
both category quite well.
yeah,
So, and I think they can go out there and gauge who the crowd is getting behind and
hmm,
play whichever role needs to be played to
yeah.
fit that situation. And that could change from week to week.
Well, and I think I would argue that, not argue, but I would recognize that I think Owens is going to end up, because when he left, he was a
Mhm.
heel wrestling against Cody.
Yeah.
But of course, that's the other thing too with modern wrestling is, bad guy gets hurt, and because of social media, we are able to kind of keep up with their prog. Back in the day
Mhm.
when someone was hurt, they just went away and then they came back and they were
Yeah.
still
We
as
had to send
dastardly.
letters and postcards
Right.
to the WWE and get an update
Yeah.
from me and Gene. Yeah.
But, with Owens coming back, of course he's going to get that face pop because everybody, it's something new for one, but
Mhm.
then Owens has been, back again. We go back and forth. The wind changes. We used to joke about it with the Big Show back in the day, but I think there's a lot of guys that fit into that
Mhm.
category now of Sami Zayn or Kevin Owens or whomever. The wind changes direction and they change their attitude. So, I think eventually Owens is going to, if this intensifies, if this feud continues on, I could see, kind of like, oh, I guess I'll finish that first thought. Owens being the bad guy, and kind of like with Orton and Randy Orton and Cody Rhodes earlier this
Mhm.
year. going into that, they were both faces, but obviously Randy turned and but he's getting cheered, and that's what I kind of want to talk about next. Is we
Yeah.
saw the failed heel turn of John Cena in 2025, and I think it was failed in the fact that it was too late. We're already announced the retirement tour. We don't want to hate the guy that we grew up, and you and I obviously were not growing up with him, but fans in general were growing up with
Yeah.
this guy, and now we don't want to hate him. We don't want to boo him. He's leaving. We're getting
Yeah.
sentimental. We're getting emotional here. And so that, in my opinion, was the failed thing with Cena. Everyone's wanting or seemingly wanting Cody to turn. They're cheering Randy Orton. I think it's time. Cody, I think could play, and I think did he play a heel in AEW at all, or was he always a good guy?
No, he's done this thing like he's doing in WWE where he says he won't turn heel, and
Yeah,
even if the crowd turns on him, he's. But I mean, he had heel, I guess, um, bits of his character or his matches would kind of seem heelish, but he never. And I think that's why they compare him to Homelander, other than just his entrance to Homelander from the TV show The Boys, who's like the Superman character who's supposed to be like the ultimate good guy, but he's actually a dick.
yeah.
And that's Cody. He's like, oh, I'm super, pro WWE. We're great. Fans are awesome, but he'll take a cheap shot, or he'll turn on his friend to get a title shot if he needs be. But
Back in the day, there was worry that if Hulk Hogan or Junkyard Dog or whomever turned bad, that then their merch sales would drop.
yeah,
They wouldn't sell the T-shirts, they wouldn't sell the action figures. But I would argue, even back then, my Hulk Hogan action figure needed an Iron Sheik to wrestle. So you're not going to
yeah,
lose out. I
yeah.
don't think especially in modern wrestling, you're not going to lose
Yeah.
out on any monetary or any merch sales. I
Well,
don't think.
I think it was when Jericho came back to WWE one time when he
Yeah,
was heel, full blown
yeah,
heel, and he didn't want any merchandise. He's like, I
yeah.
don't want people wearing my shirt in the stands because I'm a heel. And
Right.
yes, for Jericho, that's a little bit different than um, Gunther, I guess. Right now, I'm just
Hmm.
trying to find someone who's not as established, although Gunther is pretty established over the last couple of years. Um, but I think with the contracts that they have now,
Hmm.
merchandising, yeah, it adds, but it's not. You're not going to,
You're not
you
living and
know,
dying on it.
yeah, you're not going to be eating bologna sandwiches and dining on pork and beans if you uh, if you don't get the merch out there.
Right.
And I mean, and AEW has proved that you don't even need merch at all because they fail to actually bring merch to the shows. Um, but I mean, I think in that previous era, that could, for a face, that would be
Yeah.
when wrestling really took off and merchandising really became a thing,
Yeah.
that I think that was a legitimate concern.
Right.
And so then, yeah, you're like, okay, which is more important to you, making money or, you know, being your character in the ring? So,
Well, and
but now, yeah, I think now, especially with all the merchandising opportunities just beyond t-shirts.
yeah. Well, and to your point earlier, and I'm not contradicting it, but
Yeah.
in that version of Jericho coming back 20 plus years in the business, he's set, he's established. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
he could make that assertion of, yeah, I don't want any merch,
That's what I was trying to say. Yeah.
yeah, and
Someone,
seem kind of cool about it. But yeah, because I remember having but it was kind of it was a Rowdy Roddy Piper T-shirt that I had as a kid, but he had
mhm.
the Ghostbusters slash, so it was kind
Oh,
of like
yeah.
buy this shirt to show you hate Rowdy
Gates,
Roddy
but
Piper,
yeah.
but I'm sure he's
Yeah.
cashing those royalty
Yeah. I
checks.
think there's a story. Uh, there were buttons when Elvis was popular. There were
Yeah,
buttons that said, I love Elvis, I hate Elvis.
yeah,
And Colonel Tom Parker was selling both of them
you're right.
because he's like, hey, you want to hate him? Fine. I'm still going to make money off of it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I do want to talk to you about AEW and MJF specifically because I think when people say, well, there are no heels anymore, a lot of people go directly to him because I do think even with his social media presence, and he's kind of ebbed and flowed with it, but I think overall
Mhm.
he does a pretty good job with it. Now, this is my opinion, and you can disagree or counteract with that.
The hair transplants, I know.
Oh no, I do hair transplants. Uh,
MJF.
I think that Wembley should have been Will Ospreay versus MJF because it is a true good guy versus bad guy. Not that I'm a Will Ospreay or yeah, Will Ospreay hater, not Will Ospreay, Kenny
Kenny
Omega
Omega.
hater, but I guess this is where the fan expectation comes into play. You know,
Oh,
we were expecting, or at least I was, and again, very casual AEW fan.
yeah.
I expected this whole time that we were going to get MJ, and I was waiting for this story to build and kind of, and now, and I'm not an Andrade fan, so MJF kind of doing his thing with him. To me,
He's so much better in AEW right now.
I don't know, man. I was disappointed to see that happen, and I think they're still, man. Correct me if I'm wrong, presenting both Osprey and Omega as faces, right?
Hmm.
Leading
For the
into this
most part.
match.
Yeah. So my thoughts are one, MJF I like, but I don't like. Like a lot of times I feel like his mic work is the low hanging fruit. It's like the
Right.
most basic. It's like
I don't disagree with that.
take generic heel and go out and say what you would say.
Hmm.
But he can back it up. I think his matches are fine. And he plays the character well.
Hmm.
My I fully expected MJF versus Osprey at All In. When they put the match with Omega against MJF on Dynamite, I was like, oh, that's just to get Omega. He gets his title shot and gets out of the picture.
Right.
And but I guess also looking at All In, they already did MJF versus Osprey 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago in Wembley. And
Oh,
you
see,
know,
I didn't even know that. Okay.
yeah, I forgot about it too. But and that was when MJF was I think he was the international champion
Mm.
and was like all pro America and made the American belt. And then Osprey beats him for the title. So for me, as someone who has complained about WrestleMania rematches,
Sure.
I can understand. Hey, if you're back in, if All In would have been in a different location this year, maybe
Hmm.
one thing. But to be back at Wembley to rehash a match that
Yeah.
was a good match, and I'm sure fans would have been excited for it. I can see going in a different direction. Um, there are rumors about Kenny's condition, and or
Mm.
how much longer he's going to be wrestling, and so is this the start of the swan song for him?
Yeah.
And I think um, one of the problems with the AEW booking, and I mentioned this to a friend earlier before we started recording because he messaged me like based on what has happened on AEW television this week, it should have been Kenny Omega teaming with Osprey to take on the Don Callis family. Instead, it's Omega with the Young Bucks taking on the Don Callis family, and Osprey is teaming up with two guys that I've never heard of before. And it's like I said, I don't know if Tony Khan is trying to just avoid the trope of opponents
Opponents
becoming
competing. Yeah.
reluctant partners.
Yeah.
And if so, I can applaud that for trying to do something different. I just don't know if it's, but we've talked before. Sometimes predictability is okay
Yeah.
if it gets you where you need to go.
Yeah.
So, and then to your point with bringing in Moxley, where Moxley and the Death Riders were the ones that put Osprey on the shelf. Osprey comes back, and instead of getting revenge, he joins up with like the Death. Moxley explains to him like, "Hey, we're trying to, save your career. We're trying to, get you to do things differently so you have a longer career. We're trying to instill that killer instinct in you." And again, I think it's a situation where the story is very nuanced, but that nuance is hindering part of the storytelling.
Hmm. Okay. And pardon me, I
Yeah.
apologize. we talked about Cody for a
Yeah.
second. Did we go
Yeah.
into detail about a heel turn? Should they pull the trigger? And
I mean, I
it,
just said that he wouldn't do it, but
it failed with Cena, obviously. I think we can all agree on that, looking
yeah,
back on it now.
again, because timing and yeah,
Yeah, 7, 8 months later, as his career ended, Cody, I think, still has some gas in the tank, and I think
mm,
still, and I understand the delicate balance because we saw the little kids at WrestleMania the year we were there dressed like Cody, and
yeah.
do you really want to? But it's kind of like the Hulk Hogan thing, throwing the red, and if to me, a star of the magnitude of John Cena,
Yeah.
John never changed his look. If he would have come out maybe in a different set of attire or different theme music, it may have worked. Hogan, when he did it, it was a whole 180.
Yeah.
The red and yellow got replaced with black and white, and the NWO and the music and all of those factors. And I think, kind of like with Andre, when Andre turned, he wore the blue or the yellow, just regular short
So,
tights, and got the black, whatever you want to call it, thing. So I think when a wrestler turns,
yeah.
good or bad, and we don't see it often enough, I don't think, but for it to be effective, let's go back to, and I'm not saying Cody dresses like dashing Cody Rhodes, but maybe that would get some heat for him, if he grew a little mustache. I'm not saying Stardust by any means, but could a heel turn work? And outside of, but to me, his character looks more heelish now with the suits, because I go back to harken back to the Four Horsemen days of
Mhm.
Flair and Tully, wearing the suits. Gino Hernandez back, if you go way back, he kind of
Yeah.
dressed the same way. So I think Cody could pull it off as the snarky, douchey, well-dressed heel. I drink my vodka and I, have my big bus. I mean, this stuff's writing itself, in my opinion. They
Well,
just need to pull
I
the
mean,
trigger.
I think that's the point. Is Cody is a heel who doesn't realize it, and so he's
Mm,
that delusional face, and it's I guess this would be Bo Dallas in NXT.
yeah.
This is I believe I'm coming out here. You fans love me, even though you're booing me because you're saying believe,
Yeah.
believe in Bo. It's and I guess it's I've said it before, I'm not a huge Cody fan, and I maybe this is part of the reason. Like the character doesn't match to the on-screen presence. Like,
So if he's beating up an LA Knight or
yeah,
I'm trying to think of I'm trying to think of other Ron Killings, R-Truth.
mm,
Would you like Cody more? Like, to me, it's wrestling is very weird in that regard, as
yeah,
thinking of heels versus faces, because, for example, back in the day, and I was a kid, a teenager, Honky Tonk Man comes into the WWF as a good guy.
mm, yeah.
And I don't know if, and I've never asked, but I don't know if that was the original plan. Is he really truly bringing him in to be a good guy, or did they know ultimately they were going to turn him bad? Because to me, he never put off any like baby face qualities,
Yeah.
but then he did that vote of confidence, and I could still remember watching Superstars in the fan or Challenge, whatever it was on, and
Mhm.
the fans rejecting him, and then him bringing Jimmy Hart into the. I mean, to me, they were, but that's when I started liking him. Like, he was the one heel as a kid, besides Ric Flair, that I liked, that I cheered for, that I had to have the action figure, not because I wanted my Hulk Hogan figure to beat him. And yes, I was 13 and 14, still playing with my LJNs. But to me, I loved the Honky Tonk Man. And when he lost the Intercontinental title of the Ultimate Warrior, I was like disappointed. I was bummed because I loved the shtick. But, you know, shortly then after that, they kind of took the spotlight off of him, and then he kind of fell down the card for me as well. But modern wrestling fans, do we embrace someone because they're a good guy or a bad guy, or is it because of their attitude and the way they look and act and all that kind of stuff?
I mean, I think there's a lot of factors that go in. Obviously, look, uh, I think part of it is how they're presented, how we're told as fans that we should,
Hmm.
oh, you should really like this guy or you should really hate this guy. Like, well, why should I hate, so and so just because he's wrestling? Like again, and I'm trying to whenever we start talking, my brain completely erases all rosters of
Yeah.
wrestlers. But I'm like, no, should I cheer LA Knight just because he's coming out and saying yeah and
Hmm.
dissing Roman Reigns, or should I hate him because he's dissing Roman Reigns, who's the tribal chief that I've acknowledged? Um, and I don't know if you saw, I did not catch. Um, Apparently, MJF this past week on Dynamite referred to himself as the one true champion,
Mm.
which is OTC. And but apparently that was not something they're running with, but because somebody I guess posted a T-shirt that said OTC one true champion, and MJF's like, this is fake. This is
Does he even have a title?
he has his triple B title because when you win a title you get to keep it,
What's
and
Triple B?
his big Burberry belt. I
Oh,
don't know. It's the AW championship that he would wear, but now that he's lost it,
oh,
Omega has the official title. He's
right.
got
Okay. I didn't know if there was like a, uh,
yeah, and I don't know why he's wearing. I Again, this is one thing I don't understand. Get because it um, when Punk was in there and he lost to Punk or he beat Punk somehow,
yeah.
then Punk got suspended. Punk came back with the title and saying that he was the one, the real champion
Uh-huh.
and whatever. I don't know why MJF, having lost the title, is now saying coming out with the title, other than the fact that 87% of the AEW roster comes out with title belts from wherever. Um, Unless you're Brian Cage, then you just come out with a medal you won at a bodybuilding contest, just to be like, I got something, like my participation trophy. Um, Weird. So yeah, so I got sidetracked, but yes, MJF has a title. I don't understand why,
Yeah.
and hopefully the story doesn't make it into wrestling with logic, but it probably will eventually.
Yeah, tune in for an AEW version that is truly a wrestling with logic question. Do you, what about the women? Like the ladies, Charlotte Flair is one of those that kind of has flip-flopped back and forth. And again, I think just her bloodline and pardon the pun and her lineage
Mm,
and the business, Ric Flair's daughter, to me, again, a natural heel, easy to pick apart and dissect, and kind of even with the Cody thing being the second generation, because one of the things you get annoyed with Cody is that the references to Dusty. Um, I don't feel like they do it so much anymore with Charlotte because maybe Rick is
mhm.
under contract still with AEW, but I don't feel like that's the trope that they
Or
continue
they
to
follow
go with.
him on Instagram too, and just like
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, there's plenty of like second generation, third generation that you could play into, and they don't always do that. And that's a topic for another day. But um, Rhea Ripley was another one of those that I thought, the badass Judgment Day heel persona worked. I think she works as a face as well. I don't, but I think I liked her better,
mhm,
as the heel character. Asuka was another one. I like when they made her a little goofier and she was still a heel, but
mhm,
they kind of transitioned her a bit as well. But I think overall, uh, and women are Liv Morgan and the Judgment Day girls that are with
mhm.
her, women that are with her. The what is the trio that
Fatal influence,
what is it?
the fatal influence.
Yeah, you know the Bellas, I think, are natural heels
Mhm.
just because I'm not a big fan of theirs. But um, I think women's wrestling obviously becoming more and more popular as it goes on, and same with AEW. We're seeing
Mhm.
a bigger presence there, and Mercedes Moné, and who I think another natural heel. I like her better as a heel, even though. I don't know where she's at today. I think she's still a heel in AEW because she's fighting Willow
Yeah,
Nightingale, isn't she?
yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, the ladies are obviously, someone that I think never really, even though Randy Savage was a bad guy, Elizabeth to me was never like she wasn't like Sherry Martel where she's tripping opponents or getting
Mhm.
physically involved in matches. But um, the Missy Hyatts of the world, the valets, the female valets that interfered. and had those heel traits were much different than and I think maybe Elizabeth is the exception to the rule where she was managing a bad guy, but was obviously looking back and watching it, the fans loved her and embraced her as that
Which,
babyface
real
character.
quick, touching on
Yeah.
that, given what we know now about Savage's paranoia and jealousy, do you
Hmm.
think it was a wise thing to bring Elizabeth
Right.
since he was a heel and like you said, she was, more face because being a, pretty valet
Yeah.
who isn't getting involved, she wasn't doing until she joined the NWO, she wasn't doing
Right.
anything
Yeah.
heelish. Do you think that may have been a bad mistake, bad
Yeah,
cue
it is
on
it is
Savage's part?
interesting, because she could have, because back in the day she was hosting the uh what a international championship wrestling, whatever they were
Mm.
called. She was like one of the hosts of that. So could she have been on the commentary team or hosted
Yeah.
a segment or something instead of being out there? And because obviously less chance of physicality being a host or hostess
Mm.
than being in the ring. So yeah, that is an interesting point with her and the Macho Man. But um, as we wind down, I don't think the toothpaste is going to go back in the tube. The genie's not going back in the bottle. We can't unring the bell of the cool heel. And social
Yeah.
media, I think, is only going to continue to, as long as wrestlers, some wrestlers do a good job with it, but others, we know way too much. We see the kids being born. We see them at Disney World. Uh,
Mm.
you know, I don't think we would have seen the Iron Sheik and Mickey Mouse embracing at Disney parks.
Unless he was humbling him,
Yeah.
brother. I don't know why I
So
keep saying brother. Damn it, I hate you.
so, I don't think, and again, I'm not necessarily complaining about it because I do think social media has, I mean, part of my livelihood depends on it, but
Mhm.
um, it's just it's made wrestling a much different, obviously, a lot of things, but I don't follow a lot of other sports or entertainment venues, so I don't know if fans of Game of Thrones are getting as deep into the weeds of the characters and their contracts, ratings, and all that bullshit. But so
Oh
I don't
yeah,
know.
I would suggest you go online sometime, read some Game of Thrones or some Star Wars or anything that has a deep fandom.
Yeah,
We've said it before. No one hates wrestling more than wrestling fans. I think that goes pretty much along the spectrum of any fandom. No one hates something as much as people who claim to love it.
yeah, and I think that may be the closing argument here is the biggest heel in wrestling today are the fans.
Fans.
Because we turn on, or I watched, and I'll get your comments on this. You know, the whole Roman Reigns thing with Conrad Thompson saying he's overrated, and I feel like you could have a civilized conversation and debate about this, or argument even,
Yeah.
but fans are resorting to calling Conrad fat, or making fun of Ric
That
Flair,
was
or
Scott Steiner. So
whatever the case is. But I think that's, we have lost all civility with social media because people have a voice and can
yeah.
be unseen, faceless, but their voice being heard. So I
Yeah.
think
And I
that
think,
really takes a low turn.
yeah. And I think it also just in general, and maybe it is that an anonymity issue, but we don't seem to know how to have actual conversation and discussions. And, you know, you can sit here and say, if we had the discussion, I would say Roman Reigns is overrated. I'm not going to resort to be, calling you names or anything. I'm going to explain why I
Right.
feel he is overrated. You may disagree, and that's totally fine because it's an opinion. I mean, it
Right.
is a fact. It is a fact that he's overrated. But I mean, for the sake of argument, but it's an opinion. It's like somehow we've lost that concept that you're allowed to have a differing opinion.
Yeah.
And again, as long as you can, I've said this along the spectrum of anything, as long as you can back up your opinion with something other than just, I like Roman Reigns good. Like, okay, fine.
Right.
Then I will respect, I will say, okay, I don't agree with you, but you have your reasons. We have different likes.
Yeah.
The Apple is a cinematic genius classic.
Well, and like when I do Mount Rushmore Monday,
Yeah.
I am basing those on my favorites.
Yeah.
My Mount Rushmore of wrestlers, you know, Kerry Von Erich is on there because he was one of my favorites. Do I think
Yeah.
he, no, he's not one of the all-time greats, but for me, he was one of my favorites. And so I think, yeah, a lot of times if you have a differing opinion, then, people and I could see, you and I disagree on a lot of things, but
Yeah.
we don't resort to, I mean, on social media we do, but
Me.
behind closed doors, we're not like insulting each other's intelligence
Yeah.
or appearance or, whatever the case may be. And that civility is lost. And I think it's easier to do that, like you said, with that anonymity or knowing that Conrad is not going to drive to your house or your mom's
Right.
basement and punch you in the face for saying the shit you're saying to him. So
Yeah. I mean, if the last 10 minutes of Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back would become real, where everybody that gets mocked online goes and finds the people that are mocking them, and obviously violence is not the answer, but
right, right.
if there was some type of accountability,
Accountability,
maybe things
yes.
would be different.
Accountability is the answer. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Chad, as we put a bow on this week's episode, anything else you want to add?
I'm just going to pimp it. I've started this series, Wrestling with Logic. I don't know how often it happens per week. I either watch or read the recaps of every wrestling show and try to find something illogical. And there is a difference between illogical and bad booking. And so it's a fine line that I have to toe. But I like the series. I'm hoping it takes off. And I would like some engagement because, again, it is one of those things that we were talking about, I think, off air before we started recording. I think it's a good discussion point to say,
Sure.
like, is this illogical or am I overthinking something? So, or should I just shut up and enjoy the show? So,
Yeah, go engage with Chad. Chad, throw out your that's on the Out of Touchstone YouTube
but
channel.
YouTube, yeah, out of Touchstone on YouTube, yeah.
All righty, and I'll put a link in this week's write-up for the show. Friends, thanks for listening and or watching this week's episode. We will see you next time.